Starlight Media's all-hands meeting was supposed to be nothing more than a routine leadership announcement. The company had been rocked by scandal, the board was in open revolt, and senior management was being reshuffled. The packed conference hall felt airless beneath the glare of the projection screen, while nervous whispers rolled through the rows. "I heard headquarters sent the new CEO." Headquarters? So he's here to bury us? Probably a hardliner. No one else could control this mess. Natalie Reed sat in the third row near the aisle, a meeting notebook open beside her. She twisted the cap on her pen on and off, her expression unreadable. She had never cared for office gossip. Whoever became CEO made little difference to her. She cared about one thing, that no one dumped the company's dirty books in her lap. The executive hosting the meeting cleared his throat, and the room quickly settled. "Please welcome the new Chief Executive Officer of Starlight Media." The door opened. A man in a black suit walked onto the stage with unhurried steps. The overhead light sharpened his hard brow and straight nose, making the face look even more severe and impossibly familiar. Natalie's back snapped rigid. Her pen struck the table with a sharp click. No one around her noticed. Every eye was on the new CEO. But all sound drained from Natalie's world, leaving only that face, crashing back into her vision after 3 years. Adrian Sterling. No. Impossible. Cold spread through her fingertips as she gripped the edge of the table and stared without blinking. The eyes, the angle of his brows, the glacial way he looked at people, even the small motion of adjusting the microphone before speaking were identical to her memory. Adrian had always made that gesture before he spoke. She had watched him do it countless times at the dining table, in the living room, and from the bedroom doorway, a lazy adjustment of a microphone, tie, or cuff before his indifferent voice crushed someone else's feelings without mercy. 3 years earlier, that same hand had pushed a divorce settlement toward her. That same face had shown no emotion while Vanessa Cole leaned into his arms. Natalie's chest seized as if a fist had closed around her heart. Still, she refused to believe it. Maybe too many late nights had broken something in her mind. How could this happen? She had signed the agreement herself and watched the marriage end. How could her ex-husband appear 3 years later as the newly appointed CEO of her company? She stared harder, searching for one difference. Any difference. Something that would let her say she had mistaken a stranger for him. The man accepted a folder from an executive and swept his gaze across the room. His voice was low and cold. "Effective today, I will review every business unit, financial line, and personnel function at Starlight Media." The room became silent enough to hear a pin drop. He wasted no words. His volume remained controlled, but each sentence cut. "Inflated performance numbers will be eliminated. Anyone who cannot reconcile the books can resign now. And anyone stealing from this company will be personally delivered to federal investigators." Several faces changed at the final sentence. The senior executives in the front row held their polished expressions, but their backs had stiffened. Every employee understood, the new CEO had not come to contain the fire. He had come to overturn the table. Natalie heard none of it. She only watched him. Again and again. The faint scar between his right thumb and forefinger was still there from the glass he shattered years ago. So was the tiny mole behind his left ear. Even the slight downward weight at the end of his sentences had not changed. He did not resemble Adrian. He was Adrian. Adrian Sterling. Alive, standing on the stage in front of her. Humiliation, shock, and rage churned in Natalie's stomach until her temples pounded. She wanted to look down, turn away, and pretend she had seen nothing, but her body felt nailed to the chair. Why should she hide? Shouldn't the man who held Vanessa while forcing Natalie to sign be the one hiding? The thought burned the last of the colorless shock from Natalie's eyes and replaced it with fury. She pressed her lips together and stared at him more directly, almost viciously. Adrian stopped in the middle of a sentence. The entire room seemed to freeze. His eyes passed over executives and employees in row after row, then landed with perfect accuracy on Natalie's face. Her heart dropped. He recognized her. Not just now. He had recognized her from the beginning. He held her gaze, dark fire pressed beneath ice. After 2 seconds, he spoke quietly enough to sound casual, yet every person heard him. Keep staring. I'll have someone remove your eyes for you. The room went still. The air died as though someone had struck it with a club. The employee beside Natalie sucked in a breath and edged away. Several executives exchanged quick looks, but no one dared speak. Natalie sat frozen. It was not the first time Adrian had spoken harshly to her. Before their marriage collapsed, he could be cutting and ruthless when his mood darkened. At least then, however hurt she felt, she had known what they were to each other. Now? 3 years later, before hundreds of employees, he singled her out and reprimanded her as though she were a subordinate who had forgotten her place. Her nails cut painfully into her palms as the color drained from her face. People began glancing sideways at her. Others looked down and pretended to work while listening with every nerve. Some could no longer hide their shock or curiosity. No one had ever seen a new CEO use his first all-hands meeting to speak that way to one woman in the audience. This was not an ordinary correction. He knew her. And not casually. Natalie clenched her jaw against the rage in her chest. She forced herself to sit straighter and refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her humiliated. She met Adrian's stare without yielding. On stage, his expression remained indifferent, as though the remark that had overturned the room was no more than a pebble tossed aside. Before anyone could recover, he spoke again. Be home tonight. Make dinner. Don't make me send someone for you. The effect was explosive. This time the room did not merely fall silent. It detonated beneath the silence. For one terrible moment no one moved, while 1,000 unspoken thoughts crashed beneath the surface. The employees were stunned. So were the executives. One person nearly dropped a water glass. Others stared at Natalie as if they could excavate the truth from her face. Be home and make dinner? That went far beyond whether they knew each other. It sounded intimate, almost scandalously so. And it was an order. Familiar, dismissive, and unquestionable, as though obedience had always been her role. Natalie's head rang and her vision swayed. Make dinner. The words tore open an old scar like a rusted knife. Early in their marriage, Adrian often came home late from business dinners. Natalie barely knew how to cook. She burned her hands, cut her fingers, and learned anyway because he once said he was tired of restaurant food. She remembered that sentence for years. Then he began coming home less and less. Eventually he brought Vanessa to her. The other woman leaned against him with a soft, taunting smile while the divorce papers lay on the coffee table. Adrian said only, "Sign." Natalie refused. With a cold face, he swept the entire dinner she had prepared, plates and all, into the trash. Sauce splashed across the floor and china shattered. He looked down at her, colder than ice. Stop making these useless things, Natalie. It's disgusting. From that day on, cooking became one of the deepest humiliations in her heart. Now he had used it against her again in front of the entire company. Rage nearly burned through reason. A furious animal seemed trapped in her chest, demanding that she charge the stage and ask how he dared throw her away with one word 3 years ago, then drag her back into the dirt with another today. But she could not. This was Starlight Media, not the marriage that had rotted around them. One public outburst and the whole company would say Natalie Reid had an improper relationship with the new CEO and that he could control her at will. Maybe that was exactly what Adrian wanted. The more humiliated she looked, the more satisfied he would be. She drove her nails into her palms and forced the eruption back down. Her face was pale, but her chin lifted and her eyes hardened. She did not answer. And she acknowledged nothing. Adrian forced the meeting back on course. As if nothing had happened, he continued outlining the restructuring plan in a calm, ruthless voice. But the atmosphere had already changed beyond repair. No one truly listened anymore. Every thought in the room remained fixed on that outrageous command between Natalie and the new CEO. As slides changed and scattered applause rose, Natalie realized her palms were wet and her fingertips numb with cold. The moment the meeting ended, she stood. She had to leave. Leave the room, the staring eyes, and the man who had torn up her dignity and stepped on it again. But as she reached the doors, whispers pierced her back like needles. What is she to Mr. Sterling? He told her to go home and cook. What do you think? No wonder he kept looking at her. Natalie always acts so superior. Apparently. The unfinished sentence was more repulsive than if they had completed it. Natalie stopped, her spine rigid. Superior? They understood nothing. They saw only today. They had not seen the divorce agreement 3 years ago or the way her self-respect had been ground down inch by inch. Anger rose into her throat, and she nearly turned around. In the end, she kept walking. Explaining herself to them would mean nothing. Cold air struck her temples as she entered the corridor. She drew a breath and tried to quicken her pace, but someone was already waiting ahead. A member of the executive office blocked her path with formal courtesy and no room for refusal. Ms. Reed. Natalie's eyes turned cold. What is it? The man smiled without warmth. Mr. Sterling would like to see you. Of course. Her fingers curled as the anger she had suppressed began to surface. You must have the wrong person, she said softly, each word hard. His expression did not change. Mr. Sterling specifically instructed us to bring you to his office immediately after the meeting. The word bring sounded polite, but the meaning closed every exit. A few employees still lingered down the hall, pretending not to watch. Passing executives glanced over and then looked away. No one spoke. Yet the spectacle in their eyes was more insulting than open ridicule. Natalie stood there, her chest rising once. Suddenly she understood that nothing about the meeting had been accidental. Adrian had recognized her and deliberately waited. His public remarks were not slips. He wanted everyone to believe there was something unresolved and inescapable between them. Why? Revenge? Humiliation? Something else? Natalie did not know. But she knew this was far more than an ex-husband who happened to resemble the new CEO. She stared at the aide for several seconds, then smiled without warmth. Lead the way. Her voice was quiet and sharp as a honed blade. The aide stepped aside. Natalie walked forward with her back perfectly straight, her heels striking the floor in crisp, cold beats. No fear showed on her face. Only fury, compressed until it began to ferment into something dangerous. She had believed the accounts left unpaid 3 years ago were buried. Now someone had opened the grave himself. Once the CEO's office door opened, every old debt would be examined again. When the office door closed, the sounds of the corridor vanished. Natalie remained standing. The enormous office was designed in black, white, and gray, with the city skyline beyond the windows. She saw none of it. Her attention stayed on the man behind the desk. Adrian had discarded the courtesy he wore during the meeting. He tapped long fingers against the desk and spoke as though scheduling an ordinary appointment. Come home tonight. 4 words. An order. Not a request, not a test, and without the slightest preamble. Natalie looked at him and, after several seconds, laughed. The sound was cold and never reached her eyes. Mr. Sterling, she said slowly, have you forgotten that we divorced 3 years ago? Adrian leaned back, studying her as though he had expected the question. We signed an agreement. Natalie stared at him. Where is the final divorce decree? The air paused. His expression did not shift. It was never filed. Her fingers tightened sharply. She had only meant to test him, but he admitted it as casually as possible. As though it were an ordinary administrative detail. Never filed? Her voice became steadier. Say that again. Adrian looked almost impatient. You were unstable. You signed and disappeared before the petition was completed. Why is that surprising? Natalie nearly laughed from sheer fury. Unstable? She signed and disappeared? 3 years earlier, Adrian's company had supposedly collapsed. Creditors came to the house, directors revolted, and even their home was said to be at risk. Natalie stayed beside him through midnight meetings, faced angry visitors, called every contact she had, and emptied her own savings into the crisis. Then his attorney placed a divorce settlement before her, saying Adrian was trying to protect her from the fallout. She believed he still possessed one last piece of decency. So she signed. Afterward, he neither stopped her nor explained. Soon Vanessa began appearing openly at his side at dinners, client meetings, and public events. Everyone in their social circle assumed the marriage was over. Apparently, it had ended only for Natalie. He had left her outside for 3 years while she foolishly believed she had finally escaped the mud. Now, with one casual sentence it was never filed, he expected to pull her back. Natalie suppressed the nausea rising in her chest, and her voice turned to ice. You never completed the divorce, and you still dare treat me like property? Adrian studied her heavily, as though she were an object that had been sulking too long. Natalie, it has been 3 years. Enough. Enough, she repeated softly. You left the Sterling family, joined Starlight, cut off contact, and now pretend not to know me in front of everyone. What else would you call it? His voice lowered with unquestionable pressure. I didn't come here to argue about the past. I came to take you home. His entitlement made her shake with anger. She had met shameless people before, but never one so consistently certain of his own innocence. Take me home? She approached the desk and braced both hands on its edge. Which home? The one you share with Vanessa, or the one where you keep me as a spare? Adrian's eyes darkened. Don't make it uglier than it is. Uglier? You left the divorce unfinished for 3 years, paraded another woman around, took over my company, and your first order was for me to come home tonight. Which of us made this ugly? He did not answer at once. Emotion compressed behind his eyes. A cautious knock sounded at the door. A secretary entered carrying coffee, immediately sensing the tension. Mr. Sterling, the documents you requested. Put them down, Adrian said without looking away. As the secretary turned to leave, Natalie said with unnatural calm, Laura, please make a note that Mr. Sterling just admitted we signed a settlement 3 years ago, but he never completed the divorce filing. Laura Mitchell froze. Even breathing seemed to stop. Adrian's cold gaze settled on Natalie. She ignored it. My memory can be unreliable. Important statements should have witnesses. Laura stood trapped between them, her face pale. Adrian finally said, leave. She escaped almost immediately. When the door shut, Natalie straightened and adjusted her cuff as though the counterstrike had been incidental. It was the first time that day she felt the balance shift. He wanted to corner her in a private office. She had dragged his admission into the open. Adrian watched her for a long moment, then gave the faintest smile. You've learned to bite. I learned from experience. He tapped the desk carefully. Since procedure matters so much to you, let me be clear. Legally, you are still Mrs. Sterling. At Starlight, I don't want to watch you keep making pointless attempts to prove yourself. Your position can remain and I can increase your resources, but you will move home. Or resign, he added. Stay home and stop struggling out here. Natalie's temples began to pound. Keep her position? Give her resources? He spoke as though granting a favor. As though the performance she had earned over 3 years existed only because he might allow it. I realized something today, she said. You aren't half asleep. You've never woken up at all. His brow tightened. You think I'll return? 3 years ago, you threw me away without asking. Now you want to retrieve me without asking. What is marriage to you, a lost and found box? For the first time, his composure cracked. Natalie Reed. Don't say my name, she cut in. It makes me sick. The office became painfully silent. They faced each other, neither retreating. Then Adrian stood, walked around the desk, and approached her step by step. The distance vanished beneath the familiar scent of cedar. Natalie did not step back, though every muscle in her spine tightened. He looked down at her and lowered his voice. I told you, come home when you're finished with this. Don't make me collect you personally. Understood? The final word sounded almost intimate, which made it more threatening. Natalie raised her eyes, full of ice. Try it. We'll see whether you drag me home before I drag you into court. At last, his gaze sharpened. She gave him no chance to answer and turned away. Her hand reached the doorknob. Behind her, he said without hurry, You'll come back, Natalie. She did not turn. Dream on. She pulled the door open. Her heels carried her through the executive suite, back straight and cold, like a bowstring stretched to its limit but refusing to break. Only when the elevator doors closed did a fracture appear in her composure. She looked down. Her fingertips were trembling. Not from fear. From disgust, rage, and the freezing absurdity of discovering she had been treated like a fool for 3 years. The floor numbers descended. She pulled out her phone and called without hesitation. The call connected quickly. Natalie? It was a friend she had met during a college internship at the county clerk's office, now working in public records administration. I need you to confirm whether a final divorce decree was ever entered under my name. Immediately. Her friend heard the tension. What happened? Please check first. I'll send you the case information. All right. Give me a few minutes. They ended the call. The elevator reached the lobby. Natalie crossed it quickly. Outside, the wind revealed a thin layer of sweat across her back. She climbed into her car and shut the door hard, finally sealing out the world. She tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and closed her eyes. The scenes from 3 years earlier surged back like floodwater. Adrian said his company could not survive. He said the debts were too large and he feared destroying her life. He said they should divorce first and reconsider after the crisis. She believed him. She believed he was trapped, believed he was protecting her, and even believed the exhaustion and restraint in his eyes. But what if the divorce had never been completed? What if the bankruptcy had also been false? Then the agreement she signed had not been a dignified separation. It had been a carefully staged severance. Remove her, hide the assets, bring in another woman, and leave Natalie's legal status stored like an old possession that could be reclaimed whenever convenient. Nausea rolled through her. She opened her eyes and texted another contact. Please review Sterling Group's alleged liquidity crisis from 3 years ago. Focus on unusual transfers and related party accounts. I need it quickly. The recipient was a former colleague with a finance background, broad contacts, and absolute discretion. A question mark appeared immediately. Whose grave are you digging up? Natalie replied without expression. My ex-husband's. After 10 seconds of silence, her colleague called. Natalie answered. Wait, the man who took over today is actually your ex? Yes. Damn. Then you. No gossip. Just investigate. Fine. I'll find someone who can pull the old filings. Have you confirmed your legal status? I'm waiting. Another message arrived as she spoke. It was from her clerk friend. Natalie's finger paused before opening it. One glance left her motionless. The public docket summary was plain. Marital status, married. Spouse, Adrian Sterling. She stared for 3 seconds and forgot to breathe. She had expected it, yet the word married still struck with crushing absurdity. For 3 years, she had not been divorced at all. No petition completed. No final decree entered. The legal marriage remained intact. She had been deceived for 3 full years. Her friend called immediately. "Natalie, something is wrong. The court shows no finalized divorce. There is no decree in the docket." Natalie's nails dug into her palm, and the pain cleared her thoughts. "I understand. Send me the complete certified docket report." "I will. Do you want me to?" "Thank you. Dinner is on me later." She ended the call. The document arrived moments later. Natalie saved it, backed it up, and forwarded it to her private email. Her movements were precise and immediate. Her first card. Objective evidence. Not something Adrian could dismiss with a casual sentence. In court, it would strike him like an open-handed slap. Almost immediately, her finance contact sent another message. "I did a preliminary review. Several transfers look abnormal, all clustered around the date of your supposed divorce." Several spreadsheet screenshots followed. Natalie enlarged them. Large sums had been broken into smaller transfers from Sterling Group's main accounts to unrelated shell entities. One chain ended in an offshore account, while others became real estate interests and private funds. An ordinary observer might not recognize the pattern. But Natalie had spent years handling contracts, financing structures, and performance covenants at Starlight. The reorganization smelled deliberate. It did not resemble desperate liquidation before a collapse. It resembled planned concealment. The final dull ache in her chest went completely cold. The company had not simply been unable to survive. Adrian had cried bankruptcy while quietly moving money. His claims of protecting her and divorcing first may have been designed from the beginning to exclude her from marital assets and secure her voluntary signature. Her colleague sent a voice message. "I can't conclude fraud yet, but this has the pattern of a staged insolvency and asset transfer. Do you want me to keep digging?" Natalie stared at the numbers while ice formed behind her eyes. "Don't stop. I want to know everything he buried. I'll use 2 trusted sources. Be careful and don't let anyone know you're looking." "I won't." The car fell silent again. Only her breathing remained. Natalie leaned back and pressed her fingers to her brow. She did not cry. And she did not panic. The helplessness she had felt in the meeting dissolved. She now held 2 things. Proof that the marriage had never legally ended. And a trail suggesting hidden marital assets. Enough. At least enough to reverse the position. She searched for a name she had not contacted in years. Divorce attorney Noah Quinn. She had nearly retained him before believing the separation was finished. Now the road had circled back. She sent him the docket report and the suspicious transaction screenshots. "Noah, I need a formal consultation. This involves an uncompleted divorce, possible intentional concealment, and asset transfers. Can you meet today?" After sending it, she exhaled slowly. This was no longer an argument. It was not lingering love. It was reopening the case. It was an accounting. She would revisit the game she thought she lost 3 years earlier and calculate every debt. Her phone vibrated. She expected Noah, but the sender was someone else. Executive Office Laura Mitchell. Natalie's eyes darkened before she opened it. A series of images appeared. They were building access records. Times, location, and access permissions were listed clearly. The address was the marital home where Natalie had lived 3 years earlier. One final message followed. "Ms. Reed, Mr. Sterling asked me to remind you to return before 9 p.m. Your access credentials have been restored." Natalie stared at the sentence as a smile slowly formed. Cold. Without the slightest warmth. He was forcing her to return. And telling her he had prepared for it. Outside, the Starlight Media Tower still glowed with office lights. Natalie darkened her phone screen, but her eyes were colder than the night. Apparently, she would have to visit that home tonight. The elevator opened into a blast of cold air. It was just after 9. Starlight Media's offices were already bright and busy, keyboards, printers, and quiet phone calls mixing like water simmering under a lid. Natalie stepped out in heels, calm-faced, carrying her laptop and files as though this were an ordinary morning. Yet the rows nearest her felt noticeably quieter. After yesterday's all-hands meeting, everyone knew something was wrong between her and the new CEO. She had been summoned to his office afterward, and the curiosity around her return this morning was almost impossible to hide. Natalie ignored it. As she reached her department, sharp heels approached from the executive suite. "You're here early, Ms. Reed." Natalie looked up, and her expression cooled. Vanessa Cole wore a sharply tailored white suit and perfect makeup, chin lifted, her smile edged with poison. She had clearly been waiting. Several nearby employees listened without turning their heads. Natalie placed her folder on the desk and remained standing. "What do you need?" Vanessa stepped closer, speaking just loudly enough for everyone nearby. "Nothing major. I only came to remind you that after occupying a position for 3 years, it's time to give it up." The atmosphere tightened. 2 junior employees exchanged glances, their typing slowing. Natalie regarded her without emotion. "Do you mean my desk, or the position of Mrs. Sterling?" The bluntness froze Vanessa's smile. It returned colder. "Don't pretend. Everyone knows your marriage has existed in name only. He left you for 3 years, and you still cling to the title. Aren't you embarrassed?" Natalie's mouth curved carefully, but the smile was ice. People who behave disgracefully are often the ones most concerned with appearances. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Are you asking me to step aside as an executive assistant, or as the woman who expects to become the next Mrs. Sterling?" The office became even quieter. She had torn away the covering in public. Vanessa's face darkened. "Don't mistake patience for weakness. The Sterling family has already shown you more dignity than you deserve. You're controlling, you neglect your home, and you don't know when to be grateful. If your marriage failed, blame yourself. Have enough sense to leave instead of using an empty title to block everyone else." Natalie's eyes turned colder by degrees. "They showed me dignity?" She repeated it as if hearing a joke, then stepped closer and lowered her voice without sacrificing a syllable. "The performance you helped stage couldn't survive daylight 3 years ago, and it still can't now." Vanessa's face went rigid. "What performance?" "Whichever one makes you nervous." Natalie's voice was clean as a blade. "If we're discussing who came first, you aren't even qualified to stand here and boast. You carried keys, delivered messages, and cleaned up after him. Now you're posing as the wife. Don't you find that funny?" "Natalie Reed." Vanessa's voice rose, her nails cutting into her palms. "You think you still have the right." "The right?" Natalie cut her off. "Legally, I am still Adrian Sterling's wife." "What exactly are you?" Someone nearby stopped breathing. Vanessa's face shifted from red to white. She had intended to crush Natalie before an audience, only to find herself stripped bare instead. Before she could lash out, footsteps sounded from the other end of the office. The crowd seemed to part without being told. Adrian approached from the executive suite in a perfect suit, expression cold. Behind him walked Lucas Cole, Vanessa's cousin, carrying a laptop and wearing the smug look of someone newly favored by leadership. The moment Vanessa saw Adrian, grievance softened her voice. "Mr. Sterling, I only came to deliver a work notice, and Natalie humiliated me in front of everyone." Natalie said nothing. She simply watched him. She wanted to see how openly he would take Vanessa's side after 3 years. Adrian's eyes passed over Natalie, his brow already lowering. "That's enough." His voice was quiet but oppressive. "This is a workplace, not a place for you to vent. Stop attacking someone just because you can. Attacking someone just because she could." The word struck Natalie's chest, then froze whatever remained there. Any hesitation she had carried from yesterday now seemed laughable. "I'm the one attacking her?" she asked softly. Adrian did not bother to explain. He addressed the room in a formal tone. Effective today, the Harbor Point Destination Integration account will be managed by the Executive Office. Natalie Reed is removed from the project. All handoff materials are due by the end of the day. The office erupted in startled murmurs. Harbor Point was one of Starlight's most important active accounts. Natalie had built the strategy, client relationship, and partner network from the beginning. Replacing her at this stage was like cutting flesh from her body. One of her colleagues could not stay silent. "Mr. Sterling, Natalie has led this from day one, and the client will work only with her. Changing leadership now. The handoff will be completed today." Adrian cut him off and looked at Natalie as if waiting for surrender. Her authority to negotiate new sponsorships is also suspended until further notice. Delight flashed in Vanessa's eyes. Lucas stepped forward with false courtesy. "Natalie, I'll take Harbor Point from here. Please send me the full client list, budget detail, and every partner commitment you negotiated separately." Natalie looked at him once. The glance was mild, but cold touched his back. She understood. Executive oversight was only a phrase. With one order, Adrian had handed the platform she built to Vanessa's relative as a favor. He no longer bothered hiding it. Everyone felt the wind change. Some looked sympathetic, others avoided involvement, and most lowered their heads and pretended to work. Natalie did not react as they expected. She merely nodded, unnaturally calm. "Fine." Vanessa blinked, surprised by how easily she agreed. Even Adrian frowned slightly. Natalie's eyes moved from him to Vanessa's poorly concealed satisfaction. "Take the project. Change my title. Do whatever you like." A faint curve touched her mouth. "Just don't say I failed to warn you, stolen things are not always possible to carry." She turned, gathered her laptop and files, and walked into an empty conference room. Each step of her heels was crisp and final. Every eye followed her, but she never slowed. The door shut out the whispers. Natalie set down the laptop and pressed her palms against the table for 2 silent seconds. The fire still burned in her chest, but she knew the most useless response would be to run outside and continue arguing. Even winning the argument would only provide entertainment. She wanted consequences. She sat, opened the laptop, and pulled up everything she organized the night before. Access screenshots, visitor records from the old house, dates of transfers, the path of suspicious funds, and internal process records she could lawfully obtain, each item clearly labeled. She messaged her attorney first. "File it. I'm not withdrawing anything and I'm done negotiating." Noah called within 30 seconds. Natalie answered in a steady voice. "Proceed with the complaint as discussed. Seek a judicial declaration that the marriage remains valid, file for divorce, request temporary asset restraints, and include the suspicious transfers. Start today." Noah paused. "Are you certain?" "Once it is filed, Adrian will be served immediately. There won't be much room to reverse course." "That's exactly what I want." Natalie stared at the transfers on her screen. "He thinks I'm having a tantrum. Let him learn what an actual war looks like." Noah's tone became formal. "All right. We have enough for the initial filing, and we'll supplement as we gather more. If the unfinished divorce and asset concealment are established, your position is strong." "I know." After the call, Natalie opened a resignation form. She stared at the reason field for 2 seconds and typed only 4 words. "Personal career development." Nothing else. Submit. When the system displayed pending approval, she felt calmer than when the project was taken from her. She knew Adrian would not release her easily. But the submission was not a request for permission. It created a record. Next, she called the source who had helped obtain the property information. The person answered immediately, as though expecting her. "You've decided to move?" "Yes. You mentioned the house has visitor logs and archived security footage in addition to access records. Can you preserve them?" "Yes, but it must be fast." Someone has started clearing records. I can copy what's available within 2 days. Also, the transfers you asked about involve a nominee ownership layer tied closely to an offshore account. I haven't confirmed the name, but the direction is right. Natalie's eyes sharpened. Keep going. File the marriage issue first, and build the complete timeline for the asset transfers. Your initial evidence is strong. Once the case is active, it will be harder for them to bury anything. Natalie acknowledged it and ended the call, tapping her fingers twice against the table. A lawsuit alone would not be enough. She needed freedom from the marriage and from Starlight. She found the number of a long-term business partner and called. The man answered with a laugh. Natalie, what brings this call? Is Harbor Point ready for final approval? The project may be changing hands. I want to discuss working together independently. His tone immediately became serious. Something happened? Yes. I'm preparing to leave Starlight and build my own team. I have the people, resources, and client relationships. What I need is an operating partner who can help me launch. If you're willing to meet, I can come this afternoon. There were 2 seconds of silence, followed by a laugh. I always knew you wouldn't spend your whole career building someone else's company. 4 o'clock, our usual place. I'll be there. He added, if Harbor Point was taken from you, don't assume the client will accept it. Keep your partners close and don't dissolve your network. You may still take the account back. A genuine light finally crossed Natalie's eyes. Understood. When the call ended, her energy felt heavier, steadier, and more focused. Losing the project had been a knife. But the cut also removed her last attachment to the company. At noon, Natalie left the conference room, gathered essential personal materials, and departed under the ordinary reason of an external client visit. Her longtime partner, Michael Ross, asked no questions about her private conflict. He placed practical terms on the table. If you launch independently, I'll give you a joint engagement as a pilot. I'll cover part of the partner network and protect the first client transition. One condition, your team must be stable, and you personally lead it. Natalie did not hesitate. Agreed. Then it's settled. Michael pushed her coffee forward. A lot of people have wanted to recruit you. You survived at Starlight because of skill, not luck. If you leave now, don't turn back. Natalie looked through the window at the darkening sky and smiled carefully. I never planned to. At 6 that evening, she returned to Starlight Media. Rush hour crowds streamed through the lobby, reflected in the glass doors. She rode upstairs and opened the HR portal first. Her resignation request was still there. The status had not changed. Pending approval. But a system note had been added. Processing suspended. No explanation, no discussion, not even a rejection email. Someone had simply blocked the exit from above, certain she would quiet down and remain under his control. Natalie watched the words for several seconds and laughed. A shallow laugh without warmth. He still believed she was merely angry. Good. The greater his miscalculation, the harder he would fall. She closed the portal and read Noah's latest message. Complaint submitted for filing. Her fingers tightened and the cold in her eyes settled completely. The divorce action was moving, her resignation had a record, and she had secured an outside partner. Next, she would carefully transfer the relationships and team loyalty that belonged to her, not to Adrian. If he insisted on holding her down, she would make the conflict impossible for anyone to suppress. Please welcome the leader of this year's flagship initiative, Natalie Reed, to present the proposal. As the host finished, the room lights dimmed. The applause was sparse, but present. Natalie rose from the side holding a presentation remote. She wore a sharply cut white blouse and black trousers, her hair tied perfectly back, her entire presence like a newly drawn blade. Client representatives in the first row opened their packets. Starlight's senior leaders sat straight, each calculating something different. Near the center, Lucas Cole lounged with one leg crossed, smiling as though he expected a spectacle. Natalie reached the stage, and the first slide appeared. Starlight Media Annual Flagship Integrated Campaign. She began. Good afternoon. Today I will. Wait. A man's voice cut across the room from the central seat. The entire venue went silent. Adrian leaned back, turning a pen through his fingers, as though he had remembered an insignificant administrative matter. You won't be presenting this project. Heads rose throughout the audience. Natalie stood beneath the stage lights and met his eyes without speaking. Adrian lifted his gaze, his voice almost gentle. Effective today, your duties in marketing are suspended. HR will issue the transfer shortly. You're being reassigned to the executive office as my dedicated executive assistant. From now on, you stay beside me and stop working on outside accounts. A wave of low astonishment moved through the room. What is happening? He's transferring her during the presentation? His personal assistant? That's obviously. He was sent from headquarters. How can he do this on his first week? Natalie did not move. Under the spotlight, she showed no panic. Only her eyes cooled by degrees. For more exciting content, please subscribe and follow us.